Welcome to the Extra Time Podcast, where you'll hear sports stories you might not have heard about from people you might not have heard of. Let's get into this week's show.
G'day and welcome in to the Extra Time Podcast. I'm Aidan Boxy and I'm here again with Mark Woods, and this week you probably don't hear the cheer in the voice that I had last week. I am very flat. I am a very, very passionate man. If you know me, as Woodsy does, I absolutely love sport. I don't know why sometimes. I was questioning myself on Sunday night.
It does that to you, doesn't it?
Why I love sport and why I put so much of my life into it. But at the end of the day, you got to realise, and I went for a run. I did a couple of exercises. I'm doing the 75 hard, so I had to do it. But I just wanted to do it because it was great. And, you know, there was heaps of people down at my local oval, walking their dogs, playing, kicking the footy with their kids. Didn't quite make me feel better, but it put a smile on my face because the weekend was an absolute horror weekend for me, and we'll get into that later. But in the end, sport has results, and the result can't always go your way. And sometimes you have a horror weekend, Woods, like I did, where you put your blood, sweat and tears into something and all your money, and it rips your heart out.
I also think it's the emotion. I mean, you're talking about being flat now. I know it's got nothing to do with your call against the St Kilda Collingwood game, but I think it's actually...
Well, that's where it started.
It might have started by... I've saw on social media, you posted this.
Yes.
And is this got the reason why you're flat?
So, basically, as you mentioned, it started with the Saints and Collingwood game on the Thursday night, and it didn't even end with this, but this was a massive reason why. And this is exactly what I say, where when things don't go your way... And maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm the idiot here for hyping up this weekend, thinking it's going to be the best one of the year because you've got an absolute smorgasbord of sport. You got footy all weekend that I was obviously predicting pretty perfectly, I thought. You had the NBL finals, which went horrifically, as anyone who follows it would know. United went 0-2 on the weekend, including losing at the buzzer on Sunday night after this. And then, of course, the Australian Grand Prix. Now, I don't want to talk about it too much, but as everyone knows, I probably will.
You are a big Verstappen fan, and
it comes around once a year, Woods.
Your heart.
I get to see these blokes live once a year. So I've waited 366 days, because of the extra, to be here watching my beloved Max Verstappen tear apart the competition. And I'd hyped it up, so maybe it is my fault. Maybe I shouldn't have come in with such big expectations. But the bloke sent a 1:15. It has never been done before in qualifying. It has been 2 years. The last time the bloke broke down, Woods, was Australia 2022. That is 2 whole years ago. Perfect. Every single race. 43 races. Perfect. It had to be when I was there. So my Lewis Hamilton supporting mate, best mate Tague, and you know who you are, and if you're watching, mate, thanks for this. He snapped this of me watching Max smoke it up. The car blew up, the back rear brake blew up in flames into the pit lane, no longer. 3 laps in. And I thought it couldn't get much worse. I thought, all right, I'll back Collingwood. That didn't quite get up. The boys, horrible. Saints, too good, no worries. Max was pretty good in practice, but didn't really mind. Missed footy. Thought, all right, on Friday night, United, we're going into their little island. We'll knock them off. Didn't get the job done there. Like, all right, it's 1-1, whatever. Going into Sunday, all right, Max is going to take this out. This is going to be beautiful. I'm going to see him win live. This is phenomenal. Worth every cent that I paid, which is quite a bit. And then this happens. And then I was flat. And then Oscar Piastri, who was running in the podium places, gets told to move aside by his team. Even more flat. Carlos Sainz won. Full respect to Carlos. Absolutely love Carlos Sainz. He's a freak. He had surgery just 3 weeks ago.
I was going to say, he had surgery, basically missed a race.
Removed the appendix. Doesn't matter for him. Absolute warrior.
Just goes, no appendix, and wins the next race.
So this has happened, and then I'm going, all right, well, it's fine, because United are going to pack out John Cain, and we're going to get back on the board, and we're going to bring it to with one game of the win. And I get home, Woods. And maybe this is just my luck. Maybe it was just one of those days. But I get home and I flick on KO and she doesn't load. Didn't load, mate. And it wasn't because of me Wi-Fi, because I could watch the footy. I put the Richmond Port game on, and that was fine. Listening to that, perfect. I could even put some netball on, everything else.
Might have
but
been
I go to watch the basketball.
Might have been the omen.
Wouldn't happen. So in the end, I had to go into my ESPN account because I'm a smart tacker, mate. Like I know exactly what to do in a situation where things aren't going your way with technology. I never used to be able to, but you learn things. Got it up on ESPN, thinking at halftime we're looking all right. Chris Golding hit as he does because he's one of the greats. Hit an insane near half court 3-pointer. And I'm thinking, all right, this is it. Like, we'll just get humming in the second half. We'll finally blow them away like we did in game 1. And then I actually went to do those workouts because I wasn't in a great way. And then I came back and I just get a message from our old mate Sam Colson in the group chat, big Jack Jumper supporter. Bad luck, lads. I'm like, you can't be serious. I flicked it on and I watched the mini. Jack McVeigh. If I could not have been feeling any worse, Jack McVeigh decides to sink a half-court game winner to put my United in a 2-1 hole, and that was my weekend. So I woke up on Monday thinking, well, no matter what happens this week, it can't be worse than that weekend because sport will give you all the happiness you want, but some days it'll leave you feeling a bit spicy. So thanks for this one, Tage. I'll remember that for a long time, and it made me want to book tickets to Japan because I just wanted to see Max at least finish the race, which he did 43 times in a row before this happened. But at the end of the day, and I'll discuss this later, it's a mechanical sport and sometimes machines don't work for you. It happens to everybody else. So it was bound to happen to Max, and there was a little bit of me thinking it was always possible. My arrogance just thought it wouldn't, but his run of 9 consecutive Grand Prix will end at 9 wins in a row, which ties the record with, I guess, really him.
How many races are there in a season? Or how many races are there to come in this season?
There's 24 to go. Oh, there's 24 total.
Okay, so there's a few to go. So we might be in a couple of months' time talking about, is edging 9? You don't want to watch that race, I reckon, because...
Well, he just has trouble with... It tends to be... the last 2 times he's broken down, like I said, has been in Australia, and the only other time he hasn't won is in Singapore. So it's just those 2 tracks we have to worry about. Japan next week should be pretty good. Home of Honda, obviously, and Yuki Tsunoda, whose races alongside Danny Ricciardo. But I'll leave that for later. But Woods, that's why I'm flat. Thanks for supporting me and, showing the great flick taken by my mate Stitch. But wasn't the greatest weekend. But that's the other beauty of sport, Woods. There is other sports you follow, and there's more weeks. There's always next week.
So I know you mentioned it, and it happened on Thursday, but can you remind me? I'll just chuck this photo up. Can you remind me what happened? Like, was it Collingwood end up winning, as you said they guaranteed they would? Or did the St Kilda faithful, I mean, that sums it up perfectly, I think, of Spud, how I was feeling after the game, how a lot of Saints fans were beating the reigning premiers. I don't think you're too upset because the 50th gamer had a brilliant game. And I'm not talking about your man, Nick Dacos here. I'm talking about the forgotten 50th gamer of Ryan Burns from St Kilda. On the stats sheet, absolutely, I reckon had a far better game than the other one. Seb Ross does his job. He's often forgotten. There was a trivia. You didn't bring him up, and it's because he goes under the radar so many times. I think that's what I'm hoping St Kilda does throughout the season, is just go under the radar. Let Collingwood be all the hype. Let Collingwood feel like they're playing Collingwood. At the end of the day, it's 2 teams go out there, and if one team, and even in the post thing, the media's been all about, Collingwood weren't able to play, or Collingwood not playing the way they want to, or there's Caroline Wilson highlighted in Craig McRae's presser. He didn't actually say once that St Kilda did a good job, and didn't even really mention St Kilda at all. It was about what they were doing or not doing. Yeah. I had a lot of thoughts about this, and I don't really know where to start, and I don't know if you'll end up having to cut this, but you asked me what happened, mate, and what happened was the Saints stuck it up 'em, mate, and that is just phenomenal.
because this fella deserved that on his night. It wasn't Nick Dacos's night. It wasn't. It was Spud's night, and the turnout was phenomenal. If you saw on our socials, just allowing everybody to realise the legacy this guy's left. Make sure you stick up for your mates. Make sure you're always asking around, giving them that support because it's so important. Even a couple words, even just a hug every now and then. It might feel a bit weird, but just do it and make sure you do. But it was so good to see everything that is associated with Spud's game. Absolutely love what the St Kilda Footy Club has done around that. And I guess that must have just swept my mind. I must have just been busy looking at all the 50 ranked games and forgotten that these fellas were playing for an absolute immortal of their club. And boy, didn't the number 2 wear that well? I mean, from a guy who I thought, who the hell is that guy last year? It doesn't matter. He's a nobody.
He's come out of nowhere
Phenomenal.
from last year and really dominated. And I think
Spud would have been so proud. And just all
we're
of them,
talking
really.
about Marcus Winthager, obviously, and I think he's one of the people that there were a lot of memes of Winthager emptying his pockets at the end of the game. I can see you smiling now
He
because
gets the footy too, and he uses it so well.
At least the second time? I think the last time this would have happened would have been a Hawthorn game.
Yeah, when he got finned. Yeah.
So it's just good to see that, okay, the attention goes elsewhere. And teams like me, as I said, I was quietly confident that we could play to their level. I wasn't going to go the guarantee route as you did, but I
think the thing for me, and it could be a bit disrespectful, but the thing for me that cannot be discounted, even a tiny little smidgen at all, is the job that Ross Lyon did. I can't really explain how impressed I was, because I watched your boys in Geelong, and for 3 quarters it wasn't great. It was a lot of what last year was at the back end of last year, where the defence was great, stout. Geelong couldn't score, but St Kilda couldn't quite score either.
I think that's the thing.
And it was like, Ross hasn't really improved. Thursday night, I was watching him like, this is completely different. Not only are they completely shutting Collingwood down, which everyone knows is quite hard to do, regardless of their record this year, but they were the ball movement was the best I've seen the Saints move it in years. Everyone that is an exciting player, to Henry, to Higgins, to Brad Hill, they were all contributing, but it's just the confidence and the arrogance they were moving the ball and the way that the defense always chops in and makes it hard across the field. I was really impressed. And there was, to me, as weird as it sounds, because it's been a while, when the boys on Fox were digesting it after the game and saying, I think St Kilda are the real deal. I think they could actually contend this year. I didn't think anything of that. I thought, yep, that's true. Because it's a massive statement, and whether you continue to go under the radar or not, I don't know. But I know that if you play like that, you'll win a lot of games this year, and you'll make a lot of people happy, including yourself, and you deserve it. But yeah, just to see the way they went about it, and when Collingwood, really started to gain momentum with those quick goals in the fourth quarter, the maturity to just level the head. And that Jack Higgins goal, whether inbounds or not, absolutely. That's the reason he was on my love team, mate.
It's irrelevant now because it's on the thing, but
it's the reason he was on my love team. That guy can do the unthinkable, and the celebration was as good as the goal.
Now, let's just take away from Thursday night for a second. Look at around the board. The biggest takeaway from this round was there was no real close game. I think the St Kilda Collingwood game was the closest with 15 points. And then you had Geelong win by 19 points. Fremantle win by 26. North were really good for the first bit there. Melbourne beat your mob by 55.
That's pretty close by our standards, I think.
Sydney defeating Essendon, and I think that was a
a
decent close game for
10 points, 11 points at the start of the
Sydney
fourth
getting
quarter.
the victory by 30 points. Western Bulldogs down in Ballarat, or up in Ballarat, by 48 points. And I didn't watch the game, so I can't actually
I didn't
comment.
watch it either. Obviously, being at the Grand Prix, it's something you do have to give up is watching a lot of the footy over the weekend. They're pretty long days. But this is going to be the thing for Gold Coast. That's just going to be the thing. And it was last year.
You need to win the games against those that are...
Oh, you need to win away from home.
Yeah.
They just can't do it. They can't do it. Right now, I have no confidence in Gold Coast going anywhere and winning. They can win all the games they want at People First Stadium. I think I got that right. But they can't win away from home. And I know this is a different track. It's out in Ballarat. It's not to their conditions, but the way they played in their first couple games, you got to keep showing that away from home, and that's the one thing they've got to work on. Because if they can start winning even half of their away games, and they hold serve at home, they'll be a formidable force. But at the moment, they're not, because I don't trust them on the road.
Port Adelaide defeated Richmond at the G by 30 points, and that was another reasonably close game up until about just after half time.
I think what we're seeing with a few of these, and you mentioned, Essendon, Sydney, Richmond, Port Adelaide, and Freo North, it's just the ability to play 4 full quarters of footy.
Yeah. Well,
like I said,
I reckon it's not the ability to play 4 quarters of football, but to understand that.
Well, you got to play in the right mode.
You don't necessarily have to be switched on right from the start, although it does help. But you got to be more. My point is, you got to be more switched on at the second half, and you can have a really good first half and then go out and get run over, and it's just like, well, that first half is meaningless.
In a lot of these, it's a maturity thing. Like, obviously, Fremantle have got had a lot more senior players, a lot more maturity than North. When North were up and about, it was sort of a bit more like, this is sick. Oh my God. And then all of a sudden, Freo like, no, you can just tell
they just flick the switch and were able
mature. Same thing with Sydney. Like, Essendon have got that much pressure on them, but Sydney, especially at home, have been so used to it. And then Port Adelaide have been in the top 4 for the last few years, and Richmond are quite young, and it was the same thing.
They've dropped down, and I think it's the maturity factor, definitely, because you understand that it is a 4 quarters game, and you've got to play through to the third and fourth quarter at the same intensity, and sometimes you just can't do that if you're a younger side. And going to the last game of the round, I don't think it was I think it was as expected, really. GWS winning by 65 points.
There's a few Harley Reid highlights in there for them, but not much else.
But like the game of the round, it's very hard. And I've gone. It's either North Fremantle because of the North start, but I think St Kilda Collingwood just because it was the closest and because St Kilda gained the win. I'm a bit biased there, but I'm like, I can't give it too much else because there wasn't much else competition.
And the occasion and everything around it and the way they played, I agree. And Collingwood gave them a little bit of a scare in the end, which is what, as a neutral, I guess, if you're judging games, you'd like to see that. You don't like to see a side just get completely run over. And to be honest, I probably have to vote that because it's the only full game I was able to watch. I didn't mind Sydney Essendon. It was quite exciting at times. A lot of scoring, which you like to see. Adelaide Geelong, I think Geelong are playing another brand of footy that is really good to watch, really nice on the eyes. And Richmond, they might be on a slow slope down the ladder from where they have been in the heights of the last 5 years, but I don't think they're going to go down fast because they've still, the thing that they have kept is their massive heart, and no matter how good the opposition they're playing will be, they've shown that they can really scare them. And I love a side like that. If you're going to have a side in the bottom 8, bottom 9, that isn't going to make finals,
puts up.
You want them to scare the pants off the good teams that they play, and that's what the Tigers are going to do all year, I reckon. They've had some pretty tough injuries, but Liam Baker was great. He's become even more of a leader this year, and a lot of their play really threw Port Adelaide off a bit in the end. So that was another contender for me. But I'm going to go with St Kilda Collingwood on the Thursday night. A great Thursday night selection and a great occasion. A good win by the Saints.
Now, going back to the last game of the round, as you know, it did feature GWS. And if you've been watching this podcast, I think you might have an inkling in what I'm going to bring up, just because next week GWS have a bye. So I will bring up this, you did mention last week that they faced North Melbourne and they were facing West Coast. It's like John Cena facing the local enhancement talent, the jobbers.
They're just going around having a few easy ones.
So obviously this week they get the week off. They've got the call saying, don't come into work.
You're too good. You're too good at the minute.
Yeah, we don't have necessarily anybody for you. But the next person you're going to face is gather round at Adelaide Hills, Mount Barker. It's going to be Gold Coast. So that right there is
the expansion cup.
If you're going to follow this, It's going to be Gold Coast v GWS in round 4 in Gather Round.
It'd be big news if the Suns steal the
Now-
belt. I'll tell you that.
I just want to preempt and show you the contenders who are in line because we know it's Gold Coast, right? Now, in round 5, if Gold Coast happen to win, they play Hawthorn. So your mob, your team,
Chance of the belt.
you might be chasing the belt here.
I'll tell you what we'd have to do. We'd have to score a bit more, and we'd have to clean a few things up, but could happen. Where's that game?
That is at People First Stadium.
Yeah, I don't know about that. It's not a happy hunting
Yeah.
ground for my Hawks. We
So
lost
the
by
funny
quite a
thing
lot.
is, no matter who
years ago.
wins in this GWS Gold Coast game, because of it's in neutral territory, but they get the home ground advantage. And if GWS retain, they just play a team called St Kilda. So I don't know.
And that one will be in Canberra because what's actually been pretty big news over the week, if you haven't heard, is both the Sydney teams, after having a whole round dedicated to games in Sydney and Queensland and Brisbane, Gold Coast, Sydney and GWS don't play in their home states for like a month, which is quite remarkable. And a lot of people are scratching their heads about that one because the whole reason of opening round was to gather momentum for AFL footy in the rugby states, and then they're not going to play there because obviously we have gather round now, and
We've got the two
Giants have the
GWS
bye,
have the bye, then Sydney have the bye.
and then the Giants play
And
St
then
Kilda,
it's-
but that's in Canberra.
Yeah, I'm just looking. The
So-
first game back in the New South Wales area is Sydney Gold Coast in April 21, round 6. So yeah. Very interesting on
So
that.
a
But
bit of a head scratcher that, but yeah.
just a little bit of an update on the heavyweight title. One of our two teams could actually be contending for it in a couple of weeks' time. Once again, there's no title match this week, but well, there definitely is, and
Well, we'll
You're gonna
move on
bring it
now
up?
to another belt, you could call it, but it's probably one you don't want to have, and that is the good old bad kicking is bad football. And I've just got to start this offwards, and I've got to say, after the horrific nightmare weekend that I had, mate, my heart is full. I am so happy because I look back. I didn't watch much of the footy on the weekend, which is rare for me, but I had to look back.
and what did you find when you look back?
It's funny how much numbers can make you happy, Woods. It is funny how much numbers can make you happy because I found that there was only 3 teams who kicked more behinds than goals. I absolutely love that. I love that. That is what I'm all about. That is what I'm all about. That is good kicking, which means
Good football.
good football. So, honourable mentions go whoop-de-doo to my Hawks, who just had 13 scoring shots, pretty measly against the Demons. They kicked 5-8, but they've been let off. They didn't quite take it home. Richmond were the only other team outside of the winner to kick inaccurately. They kicked 13-14, which isn't too bad. You're still peppering,
It's
but
about near that 50%
improve.
mark.
and Port Adelaide couldn't quite retain it. They've improved, so well done to them. It goes to the West Coast Eagles at home, the last game of the round. They were quite inaccurate. 5 goals, 13. So just 5 of their 18 shots, which isn't great, less than a third. Not great showing from West Coast. Bad kicking is bad football, Eagles. Get it together. Maybe get Archer Reid out there if he's ready. I saw he was in the Inverloch Colmac jersey at training the other day. Love to see that. Hope you're recovering and training well, Arch. You're looking pretty good. But West Coast are the winners of the Bad Kicking is Bad Football Award this week. But I just want to give a massive congratulations to the league. And Woods, I'll probably bring up this a few more times throughout this episode, but it's funny how constructive criticism works. So I'm just going to say this. It might be a coincidence. It might be something to it. But I bring up this and I get really stern with the clubs. And then all of a sudden,
They
All but
focus on the
3
goal kicking.
all but 3 kick more goals than behinds. It's an absolute wonder. And it's crazy how a little bit of criticism on a podcast and all of a sudden people come out and they just play better. It's phenomenal. But I love to see it. Congratulations to West Coast. Hopefully you give it to someone else next week and you kick a bit straighter this week because 5-13 is not really great and with their ability at the moment. Not going to get you too far. But they'll play... who are they playing this week? They've got the Bulldogs in Melbourne. So hopefully under the roof, the kicking can be a bit better. But that's bad kicking is bad football for this week, Woods.
Yeah, well, before we move on, I've got to bring it up now. I didn't mention Gather Round before, so Gather Round is in 1 round's time. But right now, are there any other teams that you don't think can win the flag? Or are you going to wait till Gather Round?
Gather Round sounds like a pretty good measuring stick. But
I think you've said West Coast and North Melbourne at the moment. You put
no,
in
I don't have North. I have North Can.
You've got
It's
North in the can,
West
so it's
Coast for
just
me.
West Coast.
But I'm staring at my boys at the moment, and
Yep.
I'm just wondering how much I love them, because boy, it's been pretty tough at times. But I'm still going to back in that some miracles can happen, and I'm going to give them another week.
Well, they do sometimes play well on Easter Monday. Obviously, they're a younger side than the past, so let's see how they go. But right now, it's only West Coast.
Only West Coast for me. I'm going to leave it and be safe.
Now, I think that's a better time than any. I think we have to bring it up at some stage. And moving on from AFL, I'm going to let you talk about it. I know it's going to hurt, but can you just talk about the race?
Okay. Well, there's a lot that goes into this, and I think I've touched on a lot of it. But first of all, I don't want to get really mad here or really sad and draw you away from watching the podcast. That's the last thing I want to do. So I want to pump up Melbourne and Albert Park. A phenomenal effort. Phenomenal effort. And for anyone who follows F1 will understand this next number. Over 120,000 on a Friday. I'm not sure if that's true, but that is remarkable because Friday is just practice. So, the rostered on fans go all 4 days. But a lot of people, they don't really take in the Friday. They've got to work and all the rest of it. They might just come the Saturday and Sunday. But we're talking, like a couple of years ago, getting 400,000 for the weekend was a record. And I don't know the exact number, but 400,000 is well in the rearview mirror. It was remarkable. And you can tell because to get out of the joint each day was a massive test. Like a massive test. Like we're talking lines nearly a K deep with 10 people wide, and everywhere you go, you got to wait for stuff. But you love because the atmosphere was phenomenal, and that's the beauty of it.
I was in the city on Saturday night, and at the convention centre, I thought, I'll just catch a train to Southern Cross, and this was about 7 o'clock. Get to the tram stop, just see a few trams. They were absolutely packed. I totally forgot about the F1 being on until that moment. I'm like, I think I'm just going to have to walk to Southern Cross. There's no chance I'm going to even fit on a tram. They were packed like sardines.
Yeah. And
so I can only imagine what it was like actually from the joint onwards.
It was to the point where on Saturday night, Tag and myself were trying to get back to my joint, and the tram just went straight past our stop because it could not fit another human in it. And so we ended up having to get an Uber because it was just there was no other option. There was that many people around the place, and like I said, the atmosphere was phenomenal. We didn't give it. We got there at 6 on race day to try and get in near the Melbourne Walk where all the drivers walk in. Didn't get near that. Not early enough. You got to get there at 5, 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30 these days. The gates open at 8:30. Woods. It's remarkable stuff. And then we went down to the hill that we usually sit at near turn 12, and that was packed too. We didn't get a spot on the hill, but the cheers, it felt like you're in the middle of the MCG. Like it was, and we're on a corner with maybe a couple thousand people, and it's so amazing. And the racing across the weekend was just phenomenal as well. The highlight for me, obviously, Max's qualifying lap to take pole with a 1:15.9, which has never been done, with these cars around this track. Just like blisteringly quick, and to see that live and cheer that on with a few of the boys that were rocking the orange and the Dutch flag just near me was pretty cool as well. At that point, I thought it was going to be a champagne weekend, but unfortunately it wasn't. But, the race, like I said before, it's a mechanical sport. There's nothing Max could really do about it. It is what it is. But, yeah, the crowd was phenomenal. It was pretty traumatic for me. I think I said this before off air, but seeing the smoke start billowing out from Max's right rear brake and the cheer that went up I haven't heard a louder cheer and so much clapping in years. Like, genuinely, it was quite traumatic for me, but I understand because this sport's probably like no other where it's dominated by one person or one team so, so glaringly far.
It's like the Collingwood of now. They're dominant, and when they get beat, everybody gets on and celebrates.
Yeah, but it's like they don't lose. They haven't lost a game in 2 years, and they win all their games by 50-plus points. So it's that sort of thing, and that goes with the sport. And to be honest, it's like we were talking about, me and my mates. I cheered really loud when Max overtook Lewis in Abu Dhabi, and there's controversy with that. And people would have cheered when Lewis's, era of dominance finished because he was the one before Max, and I have no qualms that Max is going to keep going. I've still got the hat. It's going to stay here. He's still the triple world champion.
I was wondering,
and they can still keep chasing him because Woods, when the car's working, no one can touch him. But I'll tell you what, Carlos Sainz, you have to give him his flowers because this guy, a couple of weeks ago, they were in Saudi Arabia, which is obviously quite a hotter climate, and he was feeling quite crook, but he said, all right, I'm going to try and practice. So he's been in the car. He did like multiple laps, 20 or 30 laps in the car.
And then just went,
which
no, I
is
don't.
a very hot environment. Yeah.
I actually heard this, and that's why I was like, I actually watched Saudi Arabia, the story, and it's one reason why I actually went, I was working, and I just went, was able to chuck it on, listen to it, and so it's one of those things. I wouldn't usually do this, but not just because of you, but because of, I've said it again, the stories in F1, whether they're Australian or not, I think the Australian Grand Prix just brings it because it highlights it because it's in Australia, but you got Piastri and you got Ricciardo. But then finding out about Sands and his replacement was the F2, F2 leader, and then him getting the points in his first race, which is a rarity. But like the commentary, it adds so much to it, and someone like me not being able to do it, it's one of those things where you learn about it, and then you find out the race is within the race. You forget about the leader, and you go down to 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and there's still racing going on, and I can see the appeal to it. I haven't been to one. I think that might change next year if I've got time, but
it really is a massive festival of motorsport. It's not just the F1s that we're on. You had the Porsche, you had the Carrera Cup, and the the V8s as well, along with heaps of other activations. We had Jackie Doohan and his old man go around. Jack was in a historic car, and his old man was on his old superbike. And it's an amazing weekend. But yeah, back to Carlos. Come out of the car after doing his stint in practice on the Thursday and just felt so under the weather and thought, okay, I might need to go get checked out. He ended up needing surgery. So he goes and gets surgery, rips out the appendix. Had to get rid of the appendix, not that it's used for much anyway, but he rips that out, which is pretty big surgery. Like it's something that would, I hate to use the term normal people, but these F1 drivers aren't normal people in a great way. They're superhuman athletes. But for a normal person, you're out a couple of weeks just resting with, something getting cut out of you. Sainz was back at the track supporting Ollie on the Sunday for the race and supporting the team like nothing had even happened. And then had a week break. And then he come to Australia and he was not even changed. There was nothing wrong with him. And there's been a few memes saying he was lighter and all the other drivers should remove their appendix because lighter means faster. But the bloke was scintillatingly quick all through practice. Qualified just behind Max, and by just behind, we're just talking a couple tenths of a second. Carlos with a 1:16.1 and Max with a 1:15.9. Out qualifying his teammate, Charles Leclerc, who's usually a qualifying freak. And he just looked like, even on whatever tyre he was on, in what condition, he just looked so fast. And for a guy that had just had a serious surgery, it's just so impressive. And then, the cheers were not as loud as when he pulled out of the race, but when Carlos overtook Max on the second lap, there was some massive cheers. And it was a great overtake, but turns out Max's car was dying. But And he just never looked back after overtaking Max on that second lap, and Max, leaving the track. Carlos was just the man. He was so quick. He deserved the win in every facet of the word. And he still was the only one outside of his Max's teammate who can actually beat Max Verstappen at the moment. He has now won twice. The last 2 times Max hasn't won.
Well, I was going to say, it does when you say beat him, I don't really class this as someone beating him because...
Well, I would say that too, but I would get classified as a sore loser. But I agree.
As a neutral, I'm going, well, it wasn't a race where he was really part of. So,
the best part about
he
this,
started the race, but he didn't finish it. So
the best part about this too is Carlos's actual job is he won't have a job. He doesn't have a job for next year, basically. Lewis Hamilton, who's arguably the greatest of all time, before this season declared, I'm going to waltz over to Ferrari at the end of this year. So that's contract is signed, he's done. And then about a week later, Ferrari go, all right, we've got to pick one. And they went straight to Charles Leclerc and said, all right, you're our second. You're going to drive with Lewis for Ferrari. So Carlos actually does not have a job next year.
I think this enhances his credentials.
And interestingly, there's a few jobs that are rumoured to be on offer, and this is more of the story that you talk about within F1, and it's going to bubble and bubble on for the year, end on end. It's not going to stop until there are contracts signed. But Christian Horner, who's been under a bit of media scrutiny, we won't go into the off-track stuff, but he actually came out and said after the race that sometimes you've got to look outside of your box to, sign these drivers. And he said certainly an unsigned driver winning a race probably helps his cause. So potentially, no one knows, but down the track we might see Max and Carlos reunite. They drove together at Toro Rosso to begin their career.
Yep.
So that would be pretty cool. But I think Sergio Perez drove really well as well. But in terms of the Aussies, well, it's heartbreak, but it's not really, because I like to look at the positives, and our future world champion, and I'm going to call him that because he has all the tools. This kid, Oscar Piastri, he qualified quite way down the order, but Sergio Perez took a penalty, so he got promoted up the order a few spots, and he finished in 4th, so he grabbed himself another 12 points, but he could have finished on the podium, which would have made my day completely better. It would change fortune completely, but halfway through the race, they gave him the order that his teammate is more superior, or whether he was quicker, who knows, on a different strategy. Whatever it may have been, I wasn't paying too much attention, Woods, because I was drowning my sorrows with coffee. But he had to let Lando Norris through. And
I thought you would have been drowning your sorrows with another caffeine drink, maybe a Red Bull.
Oh, I couldn't quite get myself to a Red Bull. I couldn't quite look at anything with a bull on it at that stage, but Lando Norris was able to overtake Oscar in the end and take away that podium from him. But it was a Ferrari 1-2 with Sainz and Leclerc, and it was great to see. It was big cheers when Carlos came over the line, the smooth operator, as they call him. And it was a really wholesome race, and I'm the sort of guy where I'm mature enough, as filthy as I am, I'm mature enough to know that sometimes you've got to share it around. I wish the card hadn't blown up and he could have shared it around next week after I'm watching him live, but sometimes Max can't win, and it was Carlos Sainz. Our boy Oscar Piastri finished 4th, and he'll be really happy with that. Just into his 3rd race of his second season, and he's already looking like he can really contend with his teammate and with the teams up top, given the car stays like it is. Unfortunately, there was a bit more heartbreak, and this was on the Saturday, and it was in Q1, or qualifying 1, where the bottom 5 drivers get kicked out, and usually it's 5. This time it was just the 20th was already out, in that it's a whole nother story, but Alex Albon for Williams crashed his car in practice, and they didn't have another chassis, so they made the decision to tell Logan Sargent, their second driver, that he will not be driving, and Alex will be driving his car, which is a bit like sharing. Anyway, it's not really nice, but it's what they had to do. And James Vowles, their team principal, wasn't really happy with it. And in the end, Logan Sargent, the American driver, didn't see any of qualifying or the race, which is disappointing. So there was just 19, and on his very last lap, in the last seconds of qualifying one, Daniel Ricciardo needed to jump out of that danger zone. He was in the zone of elimination, and he pulled a remarkable lap, the quickest he'd gone all weekend, and he was in the top 10. And then they took it away from him because he surpassed track limits and he went outside the boundary, basically, for those that aren't F1 fans, on that final lap, which means it cannot be counted. And that was a heartbreaker for him. So he actually was forced to start the race way down in 18th, which was effectively second last. He was actually last on the grid to start because Joe Granu started from the pit lane. And he couldn't, well, you can be as good as you want, but it's pretty hard to recover from P18 to get any decent points. But he did a pretty good job. And Danny Rick finished in P12, just behind Alex Albon, which is a bit sad for the home fans that all turned out and hoped that his fortune would turn around in Australia, because it hasn't been quite great this year. He hasn't scored a point yet. But unfortunately it wasn't. And now he's reportedly been given an ultimatum, and that is either improve your performance in the next couple of races or the Kiwi Liam Lawson will be replacing you. So I've got all my support behind Danny Rick. I think he's definitely still got it in him somewhere. He just has to really get a feel for the car. But unfortunately, things always go how they may, and I have no one has any say in it apart from Daniel. And yeah, he's had a great career, has Danny Rick, and hopefully it wasn't the last Australian Grand Prix we see him racing at. But in saying that, it was still, even by my standards, a great race to watch, and there was still action even onto the last lap when George Russell crashed out, and it was actually stranded in the middle of the road, which was pretty nerve-wracking for him, but he got out of the way in the end and all was all good with a virtual safety car. He was chasing Fernando Alonso, who actually ended up getting a penalty for that. So, yeah, happy weekend for Oscar, in a way. Not a happy weekend for Max, but still a great race to watch. And congratulations to Carlos Sainz. I already can't wait for next year. Hopefully I'll be able to grab a grandstand seat and won't have to worry about getting a spot on the hill.
Now, Boxy, I'm just going to draw your attention to the TV for a second, just to show you a bit of the track, what it's like during race week and the months leading up to it. I saw a video of them actually preparing from last year's Grand Prix of a guy. He did the track tour a couple of times, showing the preparation, and it's quite impressive, I've got to say, of them. This is a usual, like, you can drive on this, you can ride on it, you can run on it.
Yeah, it's a street circuit, yeah.
It's a street circuit, as they call it, as you just said. Now, I don't know if you're a cyclist, but if you've got a bike, have you got a bike?
I have a bike. It's not here in Melbourne. It's down at the lovely town of Inverloch.
If you have a chance, when they take down all the F1 stuff, so it would look a bit like that. It's a bit of a blurred vision, so I'll just get back on that. My challenge for you is I want you to record yourself cycling the track, actually getting into it. I think that would be an amazing experience for you. I don't know if you've done it before.
I've driven the track.
I know you've driven the track, and I remember you really wanted to put your foot down and just feel like you were driving it.
Very enticing, but it is a 40 zone, so
exactly. But
big no for that.
Well, I just thought, what better way now? I know part of the track is actually a car park for the aquatic centre, but if you get a chance to in the coming months, and you feel like a little bit of a cycle, just record yourself, and maybe even just letting loose a bit on the bike. I think that might make a bit of a good challenge for you.
Don't think I'll quite pull a 1 minute 15, but I don't mind the challenge. And if it's weather like it was on the weekend, it'll certainly be a beautiful ride. But until next year, Albert Park says goodbye to the F1, and the next race will be, I think, in a couple of weeks in Suzuka in Japan, which is always another interesting one. But something else that's interesting, Woods, and again,
is this something you mentioned earlier? And I'm sorry to do it.
Sorrow-inducing.
I say I'm sorry to do it, but I'm a Southeast Melbourne fan. So if I just quickly bring up the standings right now, it's Melbourne United won the first game, and that was won last week, and it was 0 to Tasmania. Now it's 2 to Tasmania.
It is 2-1.
What's going on there? Because as a non-Melbourne United fan, I think I'm loving Tasmania. up and about, and I, I want them to win. I can't lie. I just
Well-
don't want United to win again because of it's like the bigger brother taking all the glory. You want the newcomer to do it. So what?
Well, that's the thing, Woods. They are the bigger brother, and they should be big brothering the competition, but they just haven't been. That first game, and if you tuned into extra time, you would have listened to me talk about how they really were dominant. They were confident. They were really dismantling the Jack Jumpers. They were bigger. They felt stronger. They were asserting their dominance, and they had that little arrogance about a team that's been on top all year, as they should. They deserve to have that. That's how they should play in a grand final series. Since then, I don't know where it's gone. On both ends of the floor, they've had lapses where they just look like a pedestrian team, really. I mean, they aren't that bigger brother. It's like if you have a bigger brother and he's just nice to you all the time and he never wrestled you when you were a kid. Like, that doesn't happen. Like, if it did, I mean, comment. But the big brother's meant to annoy the little brother. It's meant to annoy the new kid. He's meant to, make the little kid feel the dominance and the strength that he has. And they haven't quite done that. Granted, the first one was down in Tassie, which I saw a comment by Scott Roth. It wasn't by Scott Roth. It was by someone else, I think, just this morning. Just asking the question, do Tassie have the best fans in the competition now? Like, for so long, it was the jungle in Perth. The Wildcats fans was so hard to play there. They're so passionate. They still are. But those fans down at My State Bank Arena, I mean, those games, whatever you watch, from game one in round one to this grand final series, it's just it's a different environment. And Dean Vickerman tried to shut it down, tried to say it's a small island. And you can do that if you want.
They've been defending well, haven't they?
But if the coach is saying that, you've got to have that big brother attitude.
Yeah.
You've got to play like a big brother. And at times, towards the end of that game, they just not forgot how to score, but didn't score with that passion and that drive that they should be, and that motivation of a team that's been on top all year. And I don't want to make big comparisons because they come back to make you look like a clown. But it's got tiny bits of Golden State and Cleveland in 2016, where Golden State were basically the top dogs for the whole season, record-breaking record. Now, the United didn't have a record like that, but they've been on top all year, expected to win this thing for pretty much the whole year. They've got a lineup which is either all their starters are either a NBA prospect or an NBL first teamer or an award winner. And they're playing against this team in the Jack Jumpers who's just made an identity of just being there. And they don't have LeBron, so it's not the best comparison. They've got Jack McVeigh, but they don't have LeBron. But they just always stay in it. And now it's going to take a Cleveland-like effort from United to get out of this hole. But it's lucky they have Matthew Dellavedova, so he did come back with LeBron from 3-1 in that one, if you know what I'm talking about. But it's massive. I mean, that first one you sort of expect. I think you, most of the time, and this is how it's set up, you expect both the home teams to hold serve in the first two games.
Yeah, and it's who's going to break first. It's like a tennis match in a way.
And Melbourne didn't really break. I mean, until that last second of that game 3, and if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it.
Well, I think that's one of
and
having...
It's just luck in the end. And that is the beauty of basketball, because it's...
I think that it's the beauty of sport in a way. I think the game 3, I was keeping an eye on it, and it was a case of it like level. United got to a decent lead. Tasmania were able to come back, and it's not over till it's over. And the old saying, and if you're within that ability to get back in the lead, I think in football, if you're within 6 points, it's always a winnable game in the last minute. And in basketball, if you're 3 points down or 2 points down, all it takes is one shot. I've seen it so many times, and usually I'm watching the basketball because I've put money on it. And usually it goes against me in that dying seconds. I can't tell you how many times it's happened. But I didn't have any money on this, and I'm glad to see Tasmania get over the line in it.
Yeah.
But it's happened so many times.
Like I did with Ross Lyon before, I've got to give Scott Roth his flowers because the guy has been phenomenal. And if you ask me, he's outcoached Dean Vickerman, who has been, probably the league's best, I'm probably biasly saying. I mean, in that game 2, like I said, game 1 and game 2 were complete opposite. And game 3, again, if you watch the Jack Jumpers, complete opposite again. They're undersized and they can't change that. But it's the way that they used space to split defenders, especially in game 2. I watched a bit of that. I missed it on the Friday night. But I rewatched that one. And just the way that they were really cleverly splitting Shea Ili away, splitting JLA away, because they know that they're their best defenders, Travers, and making Ian Clark, making Chris Golding guard their best players, and getting them out into space. So clearing out the floor, being patient, and taking shots in space against defenders that they feel comfortable shooting against. And it was just done so beautifully. And that's why they really controlled a lot of that game. And then when the home crowd gets into it as well, and they had contributors across the board. And then to topple onto that, like I said last episode, a lot of this series is all about star players. You can talk about role players all you want, and I know how important they are, but it's about star players. And Joe Lawala-Chul was in foul trouble, and he is Melbourne's star player, and he couldn't quite deal with it like he wanted to. Multiple, United players are in foul trouble, and they looked a bit nervous. They didn't look like that big brother that knows how to deal with all of these situations that's been here. And the Jack Jumpers on the other end forced tough shots. And a lot of the time, my guy, Chris Golding, as he always does, made those tough shots. He made those contested threes. They made the contested, mid-range and at the rim with Shea Ili and the likes. But I really loved how Tassie weren't allowing them to settle into their offense like they should be. They weren't allowing them to be aggressive and forced them to take the tough ones with players that aren't the best of shooters a lot of the times. And the thing that stood out to me most in game 2 from Tassie was just their patience on both ends of the floor. And Jack McVeigh, I mean, the guy, it's just, in the fourth quarter, he's a different beast. And then Crawford as well, who was beyond struggling in game 1, just decided to light up game 2 and game 3. So well done to him. But to me, it just shows, Woods, that it really is that the most dangerous team. I think to a point, Melbourne, and it's fine to look back in hindsight now, but Melbourne would definitely have rather play Perth, and that's a massive call because they've had their troubles with Perth over the years. But this Tasmania team, their identity is that we fight. Their identity is that we don't rely on a star player. Their identity is we're energy, and their fans bring that, and their fans travel to Melbourne, and they're a team that has never won a championship. They're a team that probably shouldn't be there, even though they get there every year. They're playing with, I don't want to say nothing to lose because it's the cliche, but they're playing with this energy that's just like, well, we know if we put pressure on these guys, they've got everything won. Like, they're the ones that are supposed to be winning this. They're the ones that have been on top all year. They're not us. Like, we're just new Tasmanian team. We've got a whole state behind us. It's danger signs for United, and it is tough to play against, but they were on top all year for a reason. And I'm not saying it's over because Tasmania haven't won a championship and they're hungrier. I'm not saying that at all. I think United can and probably will win this still because they just need to rediscover that aggressive nature and rediscover that they have been the best team all year for a reason. And Tassie is still the little brother. I mean, and it comes with that patience. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm saying they should just play like Tassie because I'm not saying that, but United just seem to look like in the second half of both games that they're not using their assets to the best of their ability. They've got so many offensive rebounds in this series, and they just haven't capitalised. They need to use their big men. They need to use Travers. They need to use JLA aggressively, and that's not pounding it inside every time. That's, using them, get inside, pass the ball off to an open shooter. They've got so many great shooters. Ili can shoot. Chris Golding obviously can shoot. Clark off the bench. And just space it out. Change it up from now and then. And still, instead of relying on Ili to get a break, relying on Ili to, drive inside, relying on JLA to, clean it up and get put back, relying on Chris Golding to shoot contested threes, that's the United I don't like. That's the United that's not going to win the rest of these games that they have to win. They have to get back to how they got there, and that's spreading it around, using all of their options, because every single 5 that they can put out on the floor can score almost anywhere. And it's not just on paper, but if you look at it and you look at game one, Tassie can't guard them when they're at their best. And they have been, but only in patches. So they really need to bring their best for as close to fourth quarters as they can on Thursday night. And they need to make sure that they're mature and aggressive in the last 5 minutes, because this is what costs them. It costs them against Illawarra, and it's costing them again. They need to capitalise with their bigs and be more aggressive and decisive, and really withhold, when they're on a run, withhold that run. And, keep that fluency in scoring. I mean, Matthew Dellavedova is trying his heart out, but the guy can't do everything. Like, he had 21 in the last game. Him and Illy are just invaluable for this team. Like, they keep scoring and they keep being aggressive on both ends, but they need a whole team buy-in, and they're going to have to win 2 straight games here, and one of them is going to have to be back on that island down in Tassie. So I just think they need to work a bit harder, use their strengths, and really be that aggressive big brother. But hats off to Tassie. Their guards have been phenomenal. Their bigs have put in a huge effort, and that high screen has really killed United, especially in game 2 and then again in game 3. Whether they're using it for a pick and roll, whether they're using it for a pick and pop, whether they're just setting the screen for a little bit more space and then nailing it from 3-point land. And for some reason, and this is what really got me, like, I don't know why United are dropping so far off the screen. Like, Matty Dellavedova was back at the key, and then Crawford was outside the 3-point line, or McVeigh, or whoever it was, McDonald, and they're just lacing them. Like, stay up. Like, Daly and Shaili are good enough defenders to stay up on the ball, and we've got coverage. Like, they've got coverage inside with JLA and Travers and Hook Porty. So I don't know. That was a bit weird to me, and I heard it on the broadcast. Gazy was a bit confused as well. But it's going to take a lot to take down the huge heart of Tasmania. And they've been down 10 points. Doesn't matter. They brought on their lightning rod, or I don't know what he called it, but Majuk Den, who's just beyond a hidden gem for me. I mean, in their series against Perth, he's been injured for quite a lot. But this guy's a star. I don't know why he wasn't picked up. But here's the quote I saw from Scott Roth. This is one I was trying to think about before. But no one wanted him except the Jack Jumpers, and he's a piece of gold. And could not be more true.
That's an amazing photo as well, I think.
It could not be more well said. Like, this guy can do it all. He's an amazing 3-point shooter. He's aggressive. And in game 3, he turned it around. And Tassie's the sort of team, their heart is that big that they thrive off just one person bringing them back. And that is so dangerous. And that is why they up 2-1. And it's this guy in the last game. Jack McVeigh hit the once-in-a-lifetime game winner. But Majuk Deng got them there.
It's like Dom Sheed in the 2018 AFL Grand Final. He kicked the goal. He's the one everyone remembers. But as you said, Shuey's the Norm Smith medalist. And It's like, I'm referring to a trivia that is coming out. So if you're wondering why I said that's what he said. But it's just like
the energy.
Everybody does their role, but it's always that one play that people will remember. So I like the fact that it's a different person than the one that actually did the 3.
And he didn't play the whole game, and he's not going to get all that plaudits. And maybe he shouldn't, because Jack McVeigh was amazing in that game. 16 points. Oh, sorry, it was game 2.
But it takes more.
But
I was going to say it takes
18 points. Sorry,
it takes
for
5
McVeigh.
people to win a championship, but it takes more than 5 people in actual fact.
Yeah,
the 5 people on the court and everybody off it.
The way they just were so inspired by Deng's play. There was this one play that just for me showed exactly where the series was at in those last 2 games, and he got the ball sort of outside the 3-point line in the corner. Sort of dribbled. He had someone in his face, and he ended up getting a step. And without any time, not even a split second, he knew, I'm going straight to the hole. I'm going straight to the hoop, and I'm throwing this down. And he did it, and he swung on the hoop, and all of a sudden, Tassie were like, "Oh, we're so back. We're stealing this. This is what we're about." Whereas on the other end, United would sort of be in the same position, have that open lane to drive through, or have that shot to take, and they just second guess. And that's that aggressiveness that they've just sort of lost. They've lost that step. Whereas Tassie don't think, because they're just playing on energy.
Yep.
They're just playing like a team that's, hungry, so hungry for that first one. And they're just like, bang, whatever happens, happens. I'm taking this shot if I want it right now. I'm not thinking about it. So, in a weird way, I know I've said that Melbourne need to be calm and take their time, but they do need to be more decisive at the same time as well. But congratulations to Tassie. They're 2-1 up, and the cup's in their hands right now. They've got a home game, and if they win, it's all theirs, their first championship. And I can't discredit that shot from McVeigh either. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. It's something that Steph Curry will be proud of. You know, people in his face, seconds winding down. Didn't really look like he was going to shoot, sort of near half court, and it just floated all the way in with about a second and a half left to give Tassie that Game 3 win and turn the series on its head. But like I said, it's all to play for still. Tassie have that, you know, it's an elimination game. They're all elimination games now. Tassie have the cup in their hands, but who knows how many more games it'll go. But that's the NBL. Hopefully, Woods, my fortune can turn around and United can at least steal one of these on their way to tying it up for a championship. But that's NBL for this week. So now we'll go to Aussies around the grounds, just in case you hadn't heard my voice enough. This is my favourite segment, and this week's Weekly Wonder is this fella, Patrick, and I'm not really sure how to say his surname, so I apologise, but Patrick Murtagh, he's a former Gold Coast Suns listed player. And he's in the NFL Pathway Program. They've got a pathway program for athletes around the world to basically get drafted onto the practice squads and the squads of the NFL teams. And last year, Pat actually got selected and he got named to the Detroit Lions practice squad as a tight end. You see, he's a pretty big fella. He's quite a good player as well. But unfortunately, he just got over to America and he was forced to withdraw himself. And I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it was a hip-related injury, and it was serious enough for him to have to get some pretty long-term surgery. But the why is my weekly wonder is he's worked his way all the way back. He's still up in Queensland, judging by his socials and everything, and he's been through the International Player Pathway Program again, and he's looking at making a splash once again in the NFL, sorry, not NBL. Talk too much NBL today. He's looking at making a splash in this year's NFL draft. So hopefully he does his best and it'll be an amazing story. We'll keep our tabs on Pat and how he goes in the program and how he goes in the draft and see if the Lions or someone else pick him up. And also Tory Taylor as well, our punting sensation. But congratulations to Pat. He's my weekly wonder and hopefully he can, put his best foot forward. Next, I'm just going to discuss something I saw on the NBA. Like I said last week, I'll probably update you on the stats and everything from all our Aussies in every 2-week or 3-week block because they play quite often, so I'll just be inundating you with useless numbers. But Paddy Mills, I saw, and I'm not sure, we don't have this for you, but go look it up. He came to blows with Draymond Green, who's got quite a record of having scuffles with other players, and he got in a bit of a scuffle with Draymond today in Miami's game with Golden State, and Draymond actually pulled his neck back and sort of threw Paddy back by the neck. So that was a bit interesting, and he only really got a common foul for it, which was interesting as well. But you know our bloke Paddy, he won't back down, and he kept playing on. And unfortunately, Miami went down in that matchup, but it was interesting to see Draymond pick on our beloved Aussie. I'm sure Draymond won't be everyone's favourite after that in Australia, for sure. But that's Aussies around the grounds for this week. Short and sharp. There's not too much, given that F1 was in Australia. NFL's not quite on at the moment. But the last thing I wanted to mention is something close to my heart, and it's the West Gippsland Football League. Well, it continues. Season 2024 kicks off this Saturday with an Easter Saturday match. There's 2 of them, actually. Phillip Island and Warragul. And just in case you didn't know, and if you do know about footy and footy influences, there's probably none bigger than this man. He refers to himself as Prime Train, and he'll be donning the red, white and blue for Phillip Island this week. That's right, it'll be prime time on the island on Easter Saturday, so if you have not much to do and you feel like the trek down there, go down and watch Prime strut stuff. But if you want an even better game, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but Inverloch Comwack, Well, they won 5 premierships last year, so there'll be a few flags unveiled at the Nest on the weekend, and I can't wait for that. I'll be down there commentating for SEN Gippsland, and it'll be against the Coralline Cobras in the classic traditional season opener at the Inverloch Recreation Reserve. So make sure you get down there and see all the flags being unveiled. They'll be flying high, and hopefully Inverloch Commonwealth can start another successful season. But I just wish for really great weather. I wish that Prime has a good game on Saturday as well, and lots of people get to both of those games.
Boxy, now something hot off the press, and it's literally, as we've been doing this podcast, this has been coming out, and I thought I've got to actually talk about it because I love my Guernseys, and as you can see, Prime trained there in his Phillip Island, is it? Phillip Island Guernsey, but gather around round 4. Teams are doing it. You've seen Fremantle release one. You saw Adelaide last year release one, and literally, I think it would have been about 20 minutes ago, St Kilda have announced the return of an iconic jumper. I thought, why not actually highlight this? It is the candy stripe jumper, as they call it. The long sleeve looks absolutely fantastic, and the short sleeve. This is going to be against Richmond in Adelaide. Should every team get on board on this and have it like it's a gather around jumper. Make it a unique thing.
Yeah, I'm all for different jumpers. I think every club should have different jumpers for whatever occasion, and I'm also all for the long sleeve. Everything looks better in the long sleeve. That is a lot of stripes, but Jackie Sinclair pulls that off for sure. But yeah, that always good to have.
Max King does as well. Look at that.
Always good to have a bit of breaking news on the podcast. But if you're a Saints fan, trust me, right now they're playing great footy. Get one of them because you want to be repping that.
I might be ordering one right after this podcast.
But that's all we have time for this week on the Extra Time podcast. Catch us next week. And make sure you digest all of the sport this weekend. I'll be down at Inverloch. If you see me down there, please say hello. Hopefully the Sea Eagles can get the job done. But hopefully it's just a really good game and a really good season in the West Gippsland competition in footy and netball and everything else this weekend, AFL footy and the last few games of the NBL season. Make sure you enjoy it all, and we'll catch you next week.